The black mail-order bride was terrified, until the rancher's little girl asked, "Can you be Mama?" The trembling woman clutched her carpetbag as dust swirled around the Arizona depot, her intended groom's cruel rejection still echoing in her ears. Townspeople stared with open contempt, whispering about the audacious girl who dared reach above her station. She was destined for the next train back east, if she survived the night. Then appeared the weathered cowboy with his lonely daughter, a man carrying secrets as heavy as his grief. He offered shelter, but both harbored hidden truths that could either save them or destroy everything they'd built. She possessed knowledge he desperately needed, while he held the power to give her what she'd always sought. Would their fragile alliance survive the storm of prejudice brewing around them, or would the town's hatred tear apart their chance at redemption? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. Clara Walker stepped off the dusty train clutching her worn carpetbag and a letter that had promised her a new life. The Arizona Territory Depot buzzed with afternoon activity, but conversations died as passengers noticed her. Women pulled their children closer. Men stared with undisguised curiosity. She smoothed her best dress and searched the crowd for Samuel Garrett. A tall man in a clean suit approached. Hope fluttered in her chest. "You the mail-order bride?" His voice carried no warmth. "Yes, sir, I'm Clara Walker." "Are you Samuel?" He looked her up and down like livestock at auction, his face twisted with disgust. "I ordered something different." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara's knees nearly buckled. "Sir, I don't understand." "My letter said—" "Your letter lied." Samuel turned to the gathering crowd. "Seems the agency thought they could pull one over on me." Laughter rippled through the onlookers. Clara's cheeks burned with shame. Samuel walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Clara stood frozen on the platform. Passengers boarded the departing train, casting pitying glances her way. The conductor called final boarding. Her ticket back east lay crumpled in Samuel's discarded wake. The depot emptied. Clara sank onto a wooden bench, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Coins jingled in her pocket, enough for maybe 2 meals. The next eastbound train wouldn't arrive for 3 days. She approached the station master. "Excuse me, sir, is there a boarding house nearby?" The weathered man barely glanced up. "Not for your kind." "My kind? Troublemakers who don't know their place." Clara's stomach twisted. She walked toward town, hoping to find someone willing to help. The general store's bell chimed as she entered. "We're closed," the shopkeeper announced without looking up. "Your sign says open until 6. "Not for you." He finally met her eyes. "Word travels fast around here." Clara left empty-handed. The boarding house owner took one look at her through the window and turned the sign to closed. The diner served everyone except her. Even the church doors remained locked when she tried the handle. Night fell with desert swiftness. Clara huddled on the depot bench, wrapping her shawl tight against the cold. Coyotes howled in the distance. Every shadow held potential danger. Morning brought no relief. Her stomach cramped from hunger. 3 local men approached as she tried to wash her face at the public pump. "Look what we got here." The tallest man grinned. "Little bird's still here." "Thought you'd be gone by now," another added. "Maybe she likes our hospitality." They circled closer. Clara backed toward the depot wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Please, I'm just waiting for the next train." "Train don't come for 2 days." "Lot can happen in 2 days." Hoofbeats thundered down the main street. A ranch wagon pulled up beside the depot. The driver was built like a mountain, all broad shoulders and weathered hands. A small girl with pigtails sat beside him. "Morning, gentlemen." His voice carried quiet authority. "Something I can help you with." The 3 men shuffled backward. "Just talking to the lady, Caleb." "Looks like the lady wants to be left alone." The leader of the group forced a laugh. "Just being friendly." "I'm sure." Caleb's gray eyes never left their faces. "Don't you have work waiting?" They dispersed like tumbleweeds. Caleb climbed down from his wagon and began loading supplies. The little girl stared at Clara with curious brown eyes. "Papa, why is that lady crying?" Caleb glanced over. Clara quickly wiped her cheeks. "She looks hungry like the baby birds that fall from nests." "Hush, Grace." But the child wasn't finished. "Mama used to feed the hungry birds. She said it was Christian duty." Caleb's jaw tightened at the mention of Mama. He finished loading his supplies in heavy silence. Grace tugged his sleeve. "Papa, can we help the sad lady?" "Grace, it's not our concern." "But Mama would have helped." Clara watched this exchange with growing desperation. The next train felt impossibly far away. Her money wouldn't last. These people were her only hope, but hope had already failed her twice. Caleb studied Clara's face. Something in his expression shifted. "Ma'am, you have somewhere to stay." Clara's pride battled her desperation. Desperation won. "No, sir, I don't. You're the mail order bride Samuel rejected." "Yes, sir." Grace bounced on the wagon seat. "Papa, she could stay with us, just like when Widow Martinez needed help after her husband died." "That was different, Grace." "How was it different?" Caleb had no answer his daughter would understand. The town would talk. His reputation would suffer. Business might dry up. But Grace's pleading eyes held the memory of her mother's compassion. Mrs. Hattie Barker emerged from the general store, her sharp gaze taking in the scene. She whispered to her companion, pointing directly at Clara. More women gathered, their voices carrying disapproval across the dusty street. Grace slid closer to her father. "Papa, why are those ladies looking mean?" "Because people fear what they don't understand." "I don't understand lots of things, but I'm not mean about it." Caleb's weathered face almost smiled. He looked at Clara again, measuring something invisible. "Ma'am, I've got a spare room, just until you figure out your next step." Clara's throat tightened. "I couldn't impose." "It's not imposing if I'm offering." Grace clapped her hands. "Can you read stories?" "Papa tries, but he says the words dance around too much." Something flickered across Caleb's face. Embarrassment, maybe shame. Clara caught it and filed it away. "I can read," she said softly. Grace beamed. "Then you can be like a mama to me." The words hung in the desert air like a promise and a threat combined. The wagon wheels creaked across the desert landscape toward Caleb's ranch. Grace chattered about everything and nothing, filling the silence between the adults. Clara gripped her carpetbag, wondering what she'd agreed to. The ranch house sat modest but sturdy against the horizon. A few outbuildings dotted the property. Cattle grazed in distant pastures. Nothing fancy, but it spoke of honest work and careful maintenance. Caleb helped Clara down from the wagon. "Rooms out back." Used to be the hired hands' quarters. The small room held a bed, washstand, and single chair, clean but sparse. Clara had never been so grateful for four walls and a roof. "Supper's at 6, Caleb said. "Grace'll show you around." Grace grabbed Clara's hand the moment her father left. "Come see my room, I have books." The little girl's room overflowed with treasures. Wooden toys, a raggedy doll, and 3 precious books stacked on a shelf. Grace pulled down the top volume. "This one has pictures of princesses. Papa tries to read it, but he gets frustrated." Clara opened the book. Simple fairy tales with colorful illustrations. Perfect for a 7-year-old learning to read. "Would you like me to read you a story?" Grace's eyes went wide. "Really? You would?" Clara settled into the small chair as Grace climbed onto her bed. She opened to the first page. "Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, lived a princess who had lost her way." Grace hung on every word. When Clara finished the first tale, the child begged for another. Then another. By the 4th story, Grace was following along, her finger tracing the words. "You're a wonderful reader," Clara said. "Papa says I'm too slow." "Papa's wrong. You're exactly where you should be." Grace beamed. Something warm uncurled in Clara's chest. She hadn't felt useful in so long. Supper proved awkward. Caleb barely spoke, focusing intently on his food. Grace filled the silence with questions about Clara's journey, her favorite colors, whether she liked horses. After the meal, Clara helped clear dishes. Grace appeared with her books. "Story time." Caleb looked up from his coffee. "Grace, Miss Clara's tired." "I don't mind," Clara said quickly. She settled by the fireplace with Grace curled beside her. The lamplight cast dancing shadows as Clara read about brave knights and clever princesses. Caleb worked at the table, mending a harness. Grace pointed to a word on the page. "What's this one? Castle, can you sound it out?" "Castle, close, castle." Grace tried again, getting it right. She grinned with triumph. "Papa, did you hear? I read castle." Caleb glanced over, his expression unreadable. "That's good, Grace." But Clara caught something else in his face. Longing, maybe, or regret. The next morning brought Clara's first real challenge. Grace bounded into the kitchen where Clara was helping prepare breakfast. "Can you help with my lessons? Papa says I need to practice my letters." "Of course." Grace produced a slate and chalk. Her letters were shaky but recognizable. Clara showed her how to hold the chalk properly, how to form each curve and line. "Try writing your name." Grace struggled with the G, making it backward twice. Clara guided her hand gently. "There, perfect. It looks real now." Caleb entered as Grace was practicing. He watched from the doorway as his daughter wrote word after word, each one clearer than the last. "Grace, time for chores." "But Papa, Miss Clara's teaching me to write pretty." "Chores come first." Grace reluctantly put down her chalk. She skipped outside, leaving Clara alone with Caleb. "Thank you," he said quietly. "She's a bright child. She just needed patience." Caleb poured coffee with hands that seemed too large for the delicate cup. Her mama used to read to her. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife directly. Clara waited, sensing more. "Marie died 2 years back. Grace keeps asking for bedtime stories like Mama used to tell." "I'm sorry for your loss." Caleb nodded curtly. "Grace gets attached easy. Don't want her hurt when you leave." The warning was clear. Don't get too comfortable. Don't assume this arrangement was permanent. That evening, Grace appeared with her books again. This time, Clara had an idea. "What if you read to me tonight? I can't read the hard words. Then we'll read together. You do the words you know." Grace opened the familiar fairy tale. She stumbled through the first sentence, Clara helping with difficult words. By the third page, Grace was reading whole sentences alone. From across the room, Caleb watched over his ledger books. Clara noticed him squinting at the pages, his finger moving slowly across the lines. Sometimes he'd stop entirely, staring at a word like it held secrets. "Papa, listen to me read." Grace launched into a passage about a brave princess. Her voice grew confident with each word. Caleb set down his pencil. "That's real good, Grace. Miss Clara says I'm smart. You are smart." Grace continued reading. Caleb returned to his ledger, but Clara saw him stealing glances at the book in his daughter's hands. The longing on his face was unmistakable. Later, after Grace had gone to bed, Clara found Caleb still at the table. Papers scattered around him, pencil abandoned. "Trouble with the books." Caleb's shoulders tensed. "Just tired." Clara moved closer. The ledger lay open, numbers in neat columns, but some entries scratched out and rewritten. Mathematical errors that didn't match the careful organization everywhere else. Numbers can be tricky in lamplight. "They're fine." But Clara had seen enough. The careful way he held his pencil, how his eyes moved across pages, the mistakes that suggested guessing rather than reading. Caleb Smith, the mountain of a man who commanded respect from every person in town, couldn't read. The realization hit her like lightning. Grace's comment about words dancing for Papa, his reluctance to help with lessons, the way he watched others read with such hunger. Clara said nothing, but understanding passed between them like an electric current. His secret was safe, and suddenly she realized why he'd offered her shelter. He needed her as much as she needed him. Clara's second week at the ranch fell into natural rhythms. She woke before dawn to help with breakfast. Grace bounded downstairs each morning, eager for lessons. Caleb tended cattle and mended fences while Clara managed the household accounts. The ledger books revealed the scope of Caleb's struggle. Income entries were careful but basic. Expense calculations showed obvious errors. Bills sat unopened in neat stacks. Clara began quietly correcting mistakes, balancing columns that hadn't balanced in months. "Miss Clara, can you help me write a letter to God?" Grace asked one afternoon. "What would you like to tell him?" "Thank you for sending you to us." Clara's throat tightened. She helped Grace form each careful word, watching the child's face glow with concentration. Caleb found them at the kitchen table, Grace's letter spread between them. He read his daughter's expression easily enough. "What's that you're working on?" "A letter to God. Miss Clara says he likes hearing from us." Caleb's eyes met Clara's over Grace's head. Gratitude flickered there, mixed with something deeper. That evening brought their first real test. Grace struggled with a story about a clever fox. The words were longer, the sentences more complex. "I can't do it," Grace whined. "You can," Clara said firmly. "Sound it out. It's too hard." "Hard things are worth doing," Grace tried again. The word came slowly but correctly. She looked up with surprise. "I did it." "You always could. You just needed to believe it." From his chair by the fire, Caleb watched this exchange with growing wonder. His daughter was transforming before his eyes. Confidence replaced frustration. Curiosity bloomed where confusion once lived. Later, Clara found Caleb studying a legal document. His brow was furrowed, jaw tight with concentration. "Something wrong. Contract for selling cattle, just checking the terms." Clara glanced at the paper. Complex legal language filled the page. Terms that would confuse anyone, let alone someone who struggled with basic reading. "Mind if I look?" Sometimes fresh eyes catch details. Caleb hesitated, then slid the document toward her. Clara scanned the terms quickly, her blood chilled. "This contract is terrible. They're offering half what your cattle are worth." "Half? Look here. The price per head is listed as $15. Market rate is 30. Caleb's face darkened. "Those cheating snakes. There's more. This clause gives them rights to graze their cattle on your land for free." "What?" Clara pointed to the fine print. "It's buried in the middle, but it's there." Caleb stared at the contract like it had betrayed him. Which it had. "I've been signing papers like this for 2 years." The admission hung heavy between them. Clara understood now why a successful rancher lived so modestly. He was being systematically cheated by people who knew he couldn't read the contracts. "We can fix this," Clara said quietly. "We. I can read contracts. You know cattle and land. Together we make sure no one takes advantage again." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. The walls he'd built around his vulnerability cracked just slightly. "Why would you help?" "Because Grace deserves a secure future. And because it's right." That night, Clara rewrote the cattle contract with fair terms. She listed every correction in clear language Caleb could understand. By lamplight, she explained each change while he listened with fierce attention. "You sure about these prices?" "I helped my father negotiate contracts back east. This is what your cattle are worth." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll demand." The next morning brought their first visitor. Mrs. Hattie Barker arrived in a cloud of dust and disapproval. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mr. Smith, the whole town's talking." "About what, Mrs. Barker?" "About your living arrangements. It's scandalous." Grace looked up from her morning lessons, confusion clouding her features. "There's nothing scandalous about kindness," Caleb said evenly. "A single woman living with a single man. What example does that set?" "The example of Christian charity." Mrs. Barker's eyes narrowed. "The church ladies are concerned. Then maybe the church ladies should mind their own business." Mrs. Barker huffed like an angry hen. "This arrangement needs to end, for everyone's sake." She left in the same dust cloud she'd arrived in. Grace tugged on Clara's skirt. Why was that lady angry? Some people fear what they don't understand. "Are you leaving because of her?" Clara knelt to Grace's level. "Not if I can help it." But doubt crept in anyway. Clara saw how people looked at them during the weekly supply run. Whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Cold shoulders from women who'd never given her a chance. The general store owner refused to extend Caleb credit. "Nothing personal, Smith, just business." "My credit's always been good." "Times change." Clara watched Caleb pay cash for supplies that should have been charged to his account. The message was clear. End this arrangement or face consequences. That evening, Grace practiced writing while Clara mended Caleb's shirts. The domestic scene felt natural, comfortable, like family. "Miss Clara, will you stay forever?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Clara glanced at Caleb, who had gone very still. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope you do. I love having you here." Later, after Grace had gone to bed, Caleb joined Clara on the front porch. Desert stars blazed overhead, towns making things difficult. "I noticed. Might get worse before it gets better." Clara understood. He was giving her a chance to leave before the situation became impossible. "Grace needs stability." "She does. And you need someone who can help with the business side." "I do." They sat in comfortable silence, both understanding the stakes. This arrangement benefited everyone involved, but the town wanted it to end. "What do we do?" Clara asked. Caleb's jaw set with determination. "We prove them wrong." 3 weeks later, Grace woke burning with fever. Her small body shook with chills despite the desert heat. Red spots appeared on her neck and chest by noon. "It's scarlet fever," Clara whispered. Caleb's face went white. He'd seen this sickness take children before. Strong children. Healthy children. "I'll get Doc Morrison." Clara caught his arm. "He won't come, not with me here." "He's a doctor. He has to come." But Clara was right. Doc Morrison's wife met Caleb at their door with pursed lips and crossed arms. "The doctor doesn't make house calls to immoral households." "My daughter's dying." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before taking up with that woman." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "She's 7 years old. The doctor's decision is final." Caleb rode home through a blur of rage and desperation. Grace lay motionless on her small bed, breathing shallow and quick. Clara knelt beside her with cool claws. "What do we do?" Clara's grandmother had been a house servant in Virginia before the war. She tended sick children when their own mothers were too frightened to try. The old woman's voice echoed in Clara's memory. "We fight it ourselves." Clara sent Caleb to gather willow bark and elderflower from the creek bed. She brewed teas and tinctures from half-remembered recipes. Cool baths to bring down fever. Honey and lemon for the throat. Grace's condition worsened as night fell. Her fever spiked dangerously high. Delirium set in. "Mama," Grace whispered to the shadows. "Mama, where are you?" Clara took the child's burning hand. "I'm here, sweetheart." "Don't leave me, Mama. Promise you won't leave." The words pierced Clara's heart. She looked at Caleb, who stood frozen by helplessness. "I promise," Clara whispered. For 3 days, Clara never left Grace's bedside. She spooned water between cracked lips, changed sweat-soaked sheets, sang lullabies her own mother had sung. Caleb helped when he could, but mostly he watched Clara work miracles with determination and love. On the third night, Grace's fever broke. The child slept peacefully for the first time since falling ill. Clara collapsed in her chair, exhausted but triumphant. "She's going to be fine," Clara breathed. Caleb knelt beside Grace's bed, stroking his daughter's damp hair. Tears ran freely down his weathered cheeks. "You saved her. We saved her." In the quiet recovery days that followed, Clara organized Caleb's papers while Grace slept. She found documents she'd never seen before. Mining claims, mineral rights, legal papers that made no sense for a simple cattle rancher. One letter caught her attention. The letterhead showed a Denver law firm. Clara read with growing astonishment. The letter detailed silver deposits on Caleb's land. Assay reports showed significant value, enough to make him wealthy beyond imagination. The mining rights belonged to him through his late wife's inheritance. Clara's hands trembled as she read on. Marie Smith had been a mail-order bride from Pennsylvania. She'd inherited mining claims from an uncle who died in Colorado. The letter was dated 6 months after Marie's death. Caleb had been sitting on a fortune for 2 years, living like a poor man while his property held riches beneath the surface. "Find something interesting." Clara spun around. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You own silver mines. I own worthless rocks in the ground. These assay reports say different. Caleb, you're rich." He sat heavily at the kitchen table. "Money didn't save Marie." Clara studied his face. Pain lived there, deep and unhealed. "What happened to her?" Same thing that's happening to you. Town wore her down with whispers and cruelty. She stopped eating, stopped talking, just faded away like morning frost. The truth hit Clara like a physical blow. Marie hadn't died of illness, she'd died of despair. That's why you helped me. You reminded me of her. Same lost look at the depot. Same determination not to show weakness. Clara sat across from him. Why live like you're poor if you have all this wealth? What's the point of money if it can't buy happiness, can't protect the people you love? It can buy respect, influence, things we need to protect this family. Caleb looked toward Grace's room. This family? Yes, this family. The words hung between them like a bridge. Clara had called them family, not his family, theirs. Town council's meeting next week, Caleb said quietly. Mrs. Barker's calling for official action. What kind of action? The kind that ends with you on the next train east. Clara felt the walls closing in. All their progress, all the love they'd built, threatened by narrow minds and cruel hearts. Maybe I should go, before this gets worse. Is that what you want? Clara thought of Grace calling her mama in her delirium, of Caleb's grateful tears when his daughter's fever broke, of the home they'd created together from nothing but kindness and need. No, but what I want doesn't matter if it hurts you and Grace. Caleb reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple but profound. What you want matters to me. Grace appeared in the doorway, pale but steady on her feet. Miss Clara, are you crying? Clara wiped her cheeks quickly. Just tired, sweetheart. Grace climbed onto Clara's lap like she belonged there. Don't be sad. We're a family now. Families stick together. From the mouths of babes came wisdom adults struggled to find. Clara looked at Caleb over Grace's head and saw her own determination reflected in his gray eyes. They would fight for this family, whatever it took. The town council meeting drew every gossip and busybody within 20 miles. Mrs. Barker had spent weeks whipping up righteous indignation about the scandalous arrangement at the Smith Ranch. Clara watched from the ranch house window as wagons rolled toward town. Maybe I should just leave, Clara said for the 100th time. We've been through this. Caleb adjusted his Sunday shirt and straightened his shoulders. We face this together. Grace bounced between them, oblivious to the gravity. Can I come to the meeting? Not this time, little one. Why do those people want Miss Clara to leave? Caleb knelt to Grace's level. Because they're scared of things they don't understand. That's silly. Miss Clara's the best person I know. If only the town saw Clara through a child's eyes, but fear poisoned clear thinking. Fear of change, of differences, of people who didn't fit neat categories. The school bell clanged, calling the meeting to order. Caleb hitched the wagon while Clara gave final instructions to their neighbor's daughter who would watch Grace. Whatever happens, remember Grace needs you, Clara whispered to Caleb. Grace needs both of us. They rode to town in tense silence. The meeting hall overflowed with familiar faces wearing unfamiliar expressions of judgment. Mrs. Barker held court near the front, her voice carrying righteous authority. Decent folk shouldn't have to tolerate such brazen immorality, she declared. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. A few faces showed sympathy, but most reflected the hard certainty of the convinced. Caleb and Clara entered together. Conversations died like snuffed candles. All eyes followed their progress to empty chairs near the back. Mayor Patterson called for order. We're here to discuss concerns about moral standards in our community. Mrs. Barker rose like an avenging angel. Mr. Smith has been living in sin with that woman for over a month. Our children see this shameful example every Sunday at church. What example? Caleb stood slowly. The example of Christian charity. You call it charity, others call it something different. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but she kept her dignity intact. Let them see her strength, not their shame. Mrs. Barker, Caleb's voice carried across the hall, my late wife Marie was also a May Lorder bride. Did you show her the same Christian welcome you're showing Miss Walker? Uncomfortable shifting in the audience. Several people remembered Marie's lonely final months. That was different, Mrs. Barker snapped. How was it different? Mrs. Barker's mouth worked without sound. The truth was ugly and everyone knew it. Marie had been white, but even that hadn't protected her from the town's cruelty. The point is, Mrs. Barker recovered, this arrangement is inappropriate. We demand you send this woman away. And if I refuse, then you face the consequences. No credit at local stores, no services from local businesses, complete social exile. The ultimatum hung heavy in the stale air. Caleb had to choose between community acceptance and his chosen family. Clara started to rise. Perhaps it would be best. Sit down. Caleb's quiet command brooked no argument. He walked to the front of the hall, facing the crowd like David before Goliath. You want to know who Clara Walker really is? She saved my daughter's life when your doctor refused to come. She's teaching Grace to read better than most adults in this room. She's helped me negotiate fair contracts instead of getting cheated by smooth talkers. Mayor Patterson shifted uncomfortably. Several businessmen had been taking advantage of Caleb's illiteracy for years. More than that, Caleb continued, she's brought joy back into a house that knew only grief. Grace calls her mama because that's what she's become. Family. Not by blood or ceremony, but by choice and love. Pretty words, Mrs. Barker interjected, but they don't change the impropriety. Caleb reached into his jacket and pulled out legal documents. Maybe this will change your minds. These are mining rights to silver deposits on my land, worth more than this entire town combined. Gasps echoed through the hall. Several council members leaned forward with sudden interest. I've been living modest while sitting on a fortune because money couldn't save my first wife from your cruel tongues. But I won't let you destroy my second chance at happiness. Second chance, Mrs. Barker's voice cracked. I'm filing papers to make Clara Walker my daughter's legal guardian. She'll have full authority over Grace's care and education. Anyone who objects can take it up with my lawyers in Denver. The power shift was immediate and visible. Wealth commanded respect where kindness had found only judgment. Tom Bradley, the general store owner, cleared his throat. Caleb, maybe we've been hasty. Miss Walker seems like a fine woman. She was fine yesterday too, Tom. What's changed besides your knowledge of my bank account? Bradley flushed red. Others mumbled agreement, suddenly remembering Clara's virtues they'd overlooked. This is about more than money, Caleb pressed on. It's about the kind of community we want to be. One that destroys good people for being different, or one that celebrates when lost souls find home. Mrs. Henderson, the blacksmith's wife, stood slowly. My Billy's been asking about reading lessons. Says Grace Smith reads better than children twice her age. Miss Walker's been teaching her, Caleb confirmed. Maybe she could teach other children too. We've needed a proper teacher. Murmurs of interest replaced murmurs of condemnation. Clara felt the tide turning, powered by practical need and economic influence. Mrs. Barker stood isolated as her support crumbled. You're all making a terrible mistake. The only mistake, said Mayor Patterson diplomatically, would be losing valuable members of our community over misunderstandings. The meeting dissolved into clusters of conversation. Several families approached Clara about tutoring their children. Business owners who'd shunned Caleb suddenly found reasons to discuss future dealings. Clara watched Mrs. Barker leave alone, her crusade abandoned by fair-weather followers. Think it's over? Clara asked. The worst of it. Caleb took her arm gently. Ready to go home, home. The word settled warm and certain in Clara's heart. They had fought for their family and won. 6 months after the town meeting, Clara's makeshift school bustled with 8 eager students. The ranch house parlor had been transformed into a proper classroom, complete with slate boards and carefully organized bookshelves. Children from neighboring ranches rode in twice weekly for lessons that had become the talk of 3 counties. Grace thrived as Clara's unofficial assistant, helping younger students with their letters while tackling arithmetic that challenged children twice her age. The shy, lonely girl had blossomed into a confident leader who spoke of her Mama Clara with unshakable pride. Caleb's silver mining operation brought steady prosperity to the entire region. He employed local men at fair wages and invested profits in community improvements. The new schoolhouse he'd funded would open in fall, with Clara as the official teacher. His illiteracy remained a carefully guarded secret, but Clara had begun teaching him to read during quiet evening hours. The transformation wasn't limited to the Smith household. Tom Bradley's general store extended credit freely to all customers, regardless of color or background. Mayor Patterson had instituted policies welcoming newcomers with kindness rather than suspicion. Even Doc Morrison had begun making house calls without regard for gossip or judgment. Mrs. Barker remained the lone holdout, but her influence had withered like desert flowers in drought. She sat alone at church. Her former followers, having discovered the rewards of tolerance, outweighed the satisfaction of righteousness. On this particular autumn morning, Clara was reviewing spelling lessons when Grace burst through the front door. "Mama Clara, Papa, there's another sad lady at the train station." Clara and Caleb exchanged knowing glances. They'd been expecting this moment for months. The railroad brought mail-order brides through town regularly, and not all arrangements ended happily. "Same as before?" Caleb asked. Grace nodded vigorously. "She's sitting on the bench crying. Her dress is all wrinkled and her bag looks old like yours was." Clara's heart squeezed with recognition. She remembered that particular despair intimately. The crushing weight of abandonment, the terror of facing an uncertain future alone. "Students, please continue with your arithmetic while I step outside," Clara announced. The children bent over their slates obediently. Clara's classroom ran on mutual respect and clear expectations. These students would wait patiently for her return. Caleb hitched the wagon while Clara gathered supplies. Extra blankets, food, and most importantly, hope. Grace climbed onto the wagon seat between them, appointed herself official welcoming committee. The depot scene was painfully familiar. A young woman sat hunched on the wooden bench, clutching a carpetbag identical to Clara's from months before. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Passengers and townspeople gave her a wide berth, their expressions ranging from pity to disgust. "Ma'am," Clara's voice was gentle as she approached, "you look like you could use a friend." The woman looked up with red-rimmed eyes. She was perhaps 19, with delicate features and skin that had seen too much sun. Her dress, though clean, showed careful mending in several places. "I'm waiting for the next eastbound train." "When does it arrive?" "Tomorrow evening." Grace hopped down from the wagon and approached without fear. "Are you hungry?" "Mama Clara makes the best biscuits in the whole territory." The woman's face crumpled at Grace's innocent kindness. "I don't have money for food." "Good thing it's free then," Caleb said quietly. Clara recognized the internal struggle playing across the woman's features. Pride warred with desperation exactly as it had in Clara's own heart months ago. "Just until your train arrives," Clara offered. "No strings attached." "Why would you help a stranger?" Grace piped up before the adults could answer. "Because that's what families do. We help people who need helping." The woman looked between Clara, Caleb, and Grace with growing wonder. "You're a family, the best kind," Grace declared. "We chose each other." Clara knelt beside the bench. "What's your name?" Sarah Mitchell." "Well, Sarah, I'm Clara Walker. This is Caleb Smith and his daughter Grace. And we've all been exactly where you are right now." Sarah's eyes widened. "You were a mail-order bride too, rejected at this very depot, sat on this same bench wondering if I'd survive the night." "What happened?" Clara smiled, remembering her own transformation. "I found out that sometimes the life you think you want isn't half as good as the life you never expected." Sarah allowed them to help her into the wagon. Grace chattered about school and horses and her favorite books, filling the silence that grief and shock had created. By the time they reached the ranch, Sarah's tears had stopped. The house welcomed Sarah as it had welcomed Clara. Warm food, clean linens, and most importantly, acceptance without judgment. Sarah ate her first real meal in 3 days while Grace demonstrated her reading skills. "She's brilliant," Sarah murmured to Clara. "All children are brilliant when given proper encouragement." That evening, Sarah joined their familiar routine. Clara read stories while Caleb worked on ranch accounts with Clara's patient assistance. Grace practiced her letters, showing off for their guest. The domestic peace was infectious. "I've never seen anything like this," Sarah admitted. "Like what?" "A family that actually likes each other." Clara understood. Sarah had probably come from circumstances where survival mattered more than affection. Marriage had seemed like escape rather than partnership. "Families come in all shapes," Clara said. "The best ones choose to love each other daily. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." 2 days later, Sarah made her decision. She asked Clara about teaching opportunities in neighboring settlements. Caleb mentioned ranchers looking for capable housekeepers. Grace insisted Sarah should stay nearby so they could visit regularly. Sarah chose a position managing a boarding house 2 towns over, close enough for friendship, far enough for independence. Before leaving, she hugged each of them tightly. "Thank you for showing me that good people still exist." "Thank you for reminding us why kindness matters," Clara replied. As Sarah's wagon disappeared into the distance, Grace tugged Clara's skirt. "Will there be more sad ladies at the train station?" "Probably." "Good. We have lots of love to share." Clara looked at the life she'd built from nothing but hope and determination. A thriving school, a loving family, and a community slowly learning to open its heart. She thought of Marie, who hadn't lived to see such transformation, and silently promised to honor her memory by protecting every lost soul who needed shelter. The desert wind carried new possibilities across the vast landscape. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to choose love over fear. Clara Smith was ready for both.